The next one is shape test. There are two type of shape test. You know that one is elongation and second one is flakiness index. The importance of shape of coarse aggregate. The shape of aggregate particulars is determined by the percentage of flaky and the elongated particles containing in it. In the case of gravel, the shape may be expressed in terms of the angularity number. Presence of flaky and elongated particles in the coarse aggregate used for the construction of the base and the surface course of road uh, pavement is considered undesirable, as this may cause inert the weakness with the possibility of breaking down during the compaction as well as under the heavy traffic loads. Angular shapes of particles are desirable for angular base course and also for use of bituminous mixers due to the increased stability derived from the better interlocking when the shape of aggregate deviates more from the spherical shapes, as in the case of angular aggregate. The void content in an aggregate on any specified size increase, and hence the grain size distribution of graded aggregates has to suitably altered in order to obtain minimum voids or the highest dry density in the dry mix. The evaluation of shape of the particles is made in terms of flakiness index, elongation index, and angularity number. Flakiness index. The flakiness index Fi of aggregate is percentage by weight of aggregate particles, the listed dimension thickness of which is lesser than the 3/5 or 0.6 of their mean dimension. This test is applicable to size of larger than 6.3 mm. Standard thickness gauge is used to gauge the thickness or the list dimension of the aggregates sample, as shown in the below figure. You can see that thickness gauge. The flakiness aggregate are those which are passing through the designated slot of the thickness gauge, which are the elongated slots with the little dimensions equal to 0.6 times of the mean dimensions of each size range. These flaky aggregates are separated. The sample of aggregate is to be tested in the first sieved through the set of series and separated into specified size ranges. Now, to separate the flaky material, the aggregate which passes through the appropriate elongated slot of the thickness gauge are found. The width of the appropriate slot would be 0.6 of the average of the size range. If selected size range aggregates in the group 20 to 16 mm, that is passing 20 mm and retain 60 mm sieve, the width of the slot to be selected, the thickness gauge would be 18 into 0.6 equals to 10.8 mm. The flakiness material passing the appropriate slot from each size range aggregate is added up, and length let this total weight of flaky particles to be W1 grams. If total weight of sample is taken from the different size is W2, the flakiness index is given by 100 into W1 divided by W percent. In other words, Fi percentage flaky material, the width of the width which are lesser than 0.6 of the mean dimension. The IRC, Indian Road Congress, suggested that Fi the flakiness index of aggregate used bituminous concrete and surface dressing should not exceed 25%. The aggregate used in the waterborne macadam, bituminous macadam, should not exceed 15%. Second one is elongation index test. Elongation index EI of aggregate is an percentage by weight of particles, the greatest dimension of which or its length is greater than the 1 and 4/5 1.8 times the mean dimension. The elongation index test is not applicable for size smaller than 6.3 mm. Standard length gauge is used to gauge the greatest dimension or length of the aggregate sample, as shown in the figure below. The elongated aggregate are those which do not pass through the designated slot of the length gauge, which are 1.8 times of the respective mean size the aggregate. These elongated pieces or aggregate is separated. The sample of aggregate is tested in sieve through set of sieves and separated into specified size range. The longest side of the aggregate particles from each of the size range in the individually passed through the appropriate gauge of the length gauge. The gauge length would be 1.8 times the mean size of the aggregate. The portion of the elongated aggregate having length greater than the specified gauge for each from each size range is weighed. The total weight is elongated stone is expressed as the percentage of the total weight of the sample taken obtained to elongation index. Elongation and flaky aggregates are lesser workable and they are also likely to be break usually under the smaller loads than the aggregates which are spherical or cubical. Flakiness index and elongation index values in excess of 15% are generally considered undesirable. However, no recognition limits have been laid down for the elongation index. Determination of combined flakiness and elongation index. The Ministry of Road Transport and Highway, MORTH, Government of India, has specified permissible limits of combined flakiness and elongation index, or the combined CI of coarse aggregate is to be the different type of pavements layer. MORTH has suggested that flakiness index test should be carried out the selected sample of coarse aggregate as per the Bureau of Indian Standard BIS given above perhaps, and value of flakiness Fi is determined. Flaky particles passing through the respective slots of thickness gauge are removed and the elongation index has to be carried out on the remaining non-flaky particles. Let value of elongation index EI is combined CI of coarse aggregate in the equal to Fi plus EI. MORTH is specified for the maximum permissible value combined index coarse aggregate 30% wet mix macadam base coarse dense bituminous macadam binder course in the bituminous coarse surfaces.